Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we got another news video here to discuss. We're going to discuss the look of the standings after a couple of days of interesting game action. Plus we're also going to be looking at a couple of other things, including some signings, waiver updates, injury updates, and trade rumors involving teams like the Blues, the Penguins, the Kings, the New Jersey Devils, the New York Rangers, and the Ottawa Senators. And we'll go to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Intent Hockey channel. Before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I've never been able to do this with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all the discussed in today's video. Now I'm going to start today's video off once again by taking a quick look here at the standings as of February 29th, 2024. So very interesting standings updates after the past couple of days of game action. Currently in the Atlantic Division, the Florida Panthers lead it with 82 points, followed by 82-point Boston and 74-point Toronto. Then you have 83-point New York Rangers leading the Metro, followed by 76-point Carolina and 69-point Philadelphia. Then you have 72-point Detroit and 69-point Tampa in the wildcard positions, and they're followed by 64-point Jersey, 63-point Washington, 62-point Pittsburgh, 62-point New York Islanders, 58-point Buffalo, 54-point Montreal, 53-point Ottawa, and 48-point Columbus. Those are teams that outside looking right now in the East. Meanwhile, in the West, the 79-point Winnipeg Jets lead the Central, followed by 79-point Dallas and 77-point Colorado. 83-point Vancouver leads the Pacific, followed by 73-point Vegas and 72-point Edmonton. Then you have 68-point LA and 68-point Nashville as your two wildcard teams, and they're followed by 63-point Calgary, 63-point St. Louis, 62-point Minnesota, 61-point Seattle, 51-point Arizona, 43-point Anaheim, 35-point San Jose, and 35-point Chicago. And those are teams on the outside looking in right now in the Western Conference. So lots of interesting stuff there. San Jose and Chicago continue to fall in the standings, and they're closing in on elimination. Not exactly yet, but they're probably in the next week or two we could see the Sharks and the Hawks be officially eliminated from contention. The Blues, Flames, Wild, and Kraken are all still hanging around trying to keep pace with the Predators, who are on a tear right now and are tied to the Kings for top wildcard spot in the Western Conference. So that's interesting to note. The Jets have now retaken top spot points-wise in the Central Division, jumping the Stars and the Avalanche. So interesting stuff there. The Canucks still have a 10-point lead for top spot in the Pacific Division. So interesting stuff there. We also saw the New York Rangers now have a 7-point lead on the Metro Division title. Florida's now retaken the Atlantic Division title. The Bolts and Flyers are only 5 points up now on the Devils and 6 points up now on the Capitals, with still having games in hand. So those are going to be some interesting stuff to watch, but some interesting standings updates here from the past couple of days. Going over to a quick look here at the signings from the past few days. Now, we don't have very many signings from over the past few days, but we do have one interesting one, and that was with the Minnesota Wild, as the Minnesota Wild have signed prospect center Khusnutdinov from the KHL. Now, apparently, Khusnutdinov was able to terminate his contract that he had over in the KHL with, I think it was Sochi of the KHL. He wound up having to terminate his contract. We saw this, I think, last year. It's the same sort of situation as we saw with Ivan Miroshnichenko with the Washington Capitals. Midway through the regular season at the NHL level, Miroshnichenko was able to terminate his contract in the KHL. He signed a 3-year ELC with the Washington Capitals, and so far this year has been spending mostly of his time in the AHL. Spent a couple of NHL games, but basically he's been developing over in the AHL after signing his ELC with the Washington Capitals. Same sort of deal here with Khusnutdinov. It was a second-round pick, 37th overall in the 2020 draft by the Minnesota Wild. He's been playing over in the KHL for quite some time. Last year he was able to put up 11 goals and 41 points in 63 games over with SKA St. Petersburg in the KHL. This past year he's put up 6 goals and 20 points in 49 games with Sochi over in the KHL, and now he's decided to terminate his contract. Once that contract was terminated, shortly thereafter, the Minnesota Wild were able to sign him to a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $925,000, and the deal will be again for the rest of this year plus next year. So it's a really interesting deal. Khusnutdinov seems to be a really good prospect. I think eventually he could be a solid third-line, maybe even second-line center for this Minnesota Wild team. It looks like he has a lot of talent, especially playing over in the KHL, so he's developed quite a lot over there. He's now earned himself a 2-year ELC, and hopefully he'll be able to make the most of this. So this is a decent signing. Like I said, sort of the same thing we saw with Miroshnichenko, a really good prospect playing over the KHL. who terminated his contract over in the KHL to come over to North America. I expect him to probably finish up the season in the AHL this year. Maybe he gets a look at the NHL level next year, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he started the season off next year in the AHL, maybe got a couple of looks throughout next year at the NHL level. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. This is a really good pickup there for the Wild. Khusnutdinov, like I said, is a pretty good prospect. I think eventually he should be able to be an NHL forward, and he should be able to continue to develop in the AHL now. So really good stuff there for the Wild to get Khusnutdinov from the KHL, and they're able to sign him to a 2-year ALC, and he should now be able to develop either the AHL or NHL level. So very good stuff there from the Minnesota Wild. But that's the only signing we have from the past couple days. It was an interesting signing, but that was the only signing nonetheless. We'll go over to a quick waiver update here from the past few days. Not very much stuff here to discuss, but we did have one waiver placement here from the past couple of days, and that was yesterday. We saw Petersen from the Philadelphia Flyers be placed on waivers. Now, this isn't too much of a surprise. Petersen's already been placed on waivers earlier in the year when they wanted to run with Hart and Urson. Now, Petersen's been the backup to Urson ever since Hart was part of that 2018 World Junior team and he left the team. So he had been basically a backup, but after an atrocious game from Petersen over the weekend, I think it was, against the Pittsburgh Penguins, this Flyers team has lost its patience with Petersen, and they want to try and get Sandstrom, who's basically their 4th string goaltender to start the season, but now the 3rd string goaltender. They want to get him some game action and see if he can run with a backup role, so they're placing Petersen on waivers. Now, Petersen has this year plus next year left at a $5 million AAV cap hit, and he's not played overly well, especially that game against Pittsburgh. I think it was a couple of days ago. So this Flyers team, I would expect to probably wind up clearing Petersen. Like I said, the rest of this year plus one more season at $5 million, no one's going to take that on, especially with a lot of cap-strapped teams, and especially with Petersen playing the way he is right now. So I expect him to probably clear. It's very, very likely he winds up clearing, so I wouldn't be overly shocked if he winds up clearing, and I wouldn't be overly surprised. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. I'm not exactly sure the complete outcome, given the fact that at this point in time, I don't know exactly what happens with the waiver updates, but I would probably say it's a very likely chance at this point in time that Petersen does wind up clearing waivers, and he will go back down to the minors. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens. This is a really good placement there for the Flyers. This should be able to get 3rd string goaltender Sandstrom a couple of game action, see what they have in him, but this is a really good move there for the Flyers, given the fact Petersen has not played overly well over the past little while. So interesting move there, but it's the only waiver we have over the past little while. Petersen's been placed on waivers by the Philadelphia Flyers after a couple of bad outings, and with this cap hit of $5 million for the rest of this year plus next year, I expect he probably does wind up clearing. So some interesting moves there from the Philadelphia Flyers from the waiver update part of the video, but that was the only waiver update we have over the past couple of days. Going over to the injury update part of the video, we don't have too many injury updates from the past few days. First, Adrian Kempe has an upper body injury. He's out for an unknown period of time. I'll get to this in a little bit because this could have some major implications to the LA Kings trade deadline plans, but for the time being, Kempe is going to be out for an unknown period of time due to an upper body injury. Josh Norris has an upper body injury as well and is also going to be out for an unknown period of time. It looks like he hurt his shoulder, which is awful news given the fact he missed the majority of last year with a shoulder injury. So hopefully Norris is not going to be out for an overly long period of time, but that's a horrible blow for them. Then Sanderson in Ottawa, Chabot in Ottawa, and Mackenzie Blackwood in San Jose all have undisclosed injuries, and they're going to be out for an unknown period of time for San Jose Sharks and Ottawa Senators. So that's awful news for those teams. Blackwood's been a really good starting goaltender for the Sharks, so for the time being it's going to be Kakanen's net. Well, the Sens, who have not done overly well over the past handful of games, are going to be losing 2 of their top defensemen in Chabot and Sanderson for the time being. Hopefully they're not going for an overly long period of time, but those are going to be some pretty bad injury updates. And then Joe Nagajevic has an undisclosed injury and is out day-to-day for the Florida Panthers. So that's a really bad blow there for the Panthers. Losing a solid bomb 6-4 for the next little bit, so that's a pretty bad blow there too. But then we also saw Jeff Skinner be cleared to play for Buffalo, Troy Stecher be cleared to play for Arizona, Jalen Chatfield be cleared to play for Carolina, Eriksson Ek be cleared to play for Minnesota, and Yanni Hakanpää be cleared to play for Dallas, and they've most likely gone back into game action, and if they haven't, then they will in the not too distant future. So a really good pickup there for some of those teams. So really good to see guys like Hakanpää in Dallas, Skinner in Buffalo, and Eriksson Ek in Minnesota all be back after dealing with some injuries. But bad news to see guys like Sanderson, Chabot, and Ottawa go down with injuries. Adrian Kempe for sure in LA go down with an injury, and Mackenzie Blackwood and San Jose go down with an injury, and hopefully those guys are able to get back in the not too distant future, not going to be out for an overly long period of time. But definitely still some really bad injury updates there from the past couple of days. And lastly here, going over to a couple of trade rumors from the past few days. Now first we're going to start with the St. Louis Blues. As we looked at in the standings, the Blues are currently at 63 points. The last 2 days of game action has not been kind to the St. Louis Blues, as they have lost not once but twice. They lost 4-2 to the Winnipeg Jets in regulation, and then they had had a 2-0 lead early on against the Edmonton Oilers, but they gave up 3 straight goals, including the OT winner to Connor McDavid. They blew that lead, and they wound up losing in overtime. So it's not really great news there for St. Louis Blues. Now, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I would have said the Blues would probably stay pat, maybe even add a piece or two, given the fact they were in a playoff spot. They were on a 5-game winning streak. They looked like they were doing absolutely fantastic. Fast forward a week and a half, 2 weeks later, they've lost 4 of 6 games. They're now 5 points out of a playoff spot. And as much as they do still have a game in hand on Nashville, there's no guarantee they'll even be able to catch up to them before the trade deadline. So given that fact, and given how aggressive GM Doug Armstrong has been in the past to move pieces off this roster, especially if they're not on a playoff spot, I wouldn't be overly surprised if the Blues wind up being sellers right now. If the Blues are not able to get themselves to within like 2 points, and even then, maybe the Blues are going to wind up being sellers. I think it's quite possible. And if the Blues are sellers, who could wind up being moved? At this point, the UFAs, I think, have to be considered to be moved. That's Marco Scandella on the blue line, plus Vrana, Kapanen, and Blais on the forward group. I would not be surprised if any one of those guys wanted to be moved. But most of those guys are depth players. Vrana hasn't had a good season this year. Blais a decent bottom 6 forward. Kapanen's a decent bottom 6 forward. Scandella's an alright third pair defenseman. But none of those guys are really huge, high-end players. So that sort of brings up the question, will they move a couple of players with term? Some players that have been mentioned, and 2 players specifically that I really do think they have to consider moving is Pavel Buchnevich and Parayko. Now, and I really do think they need to move a defenseman. Now, Krug was supposed to be moving in the offseason, but he negated a trade with his no movement clause. I highly doubt he'd probably be willing to make another move and consider possibly moving out. So, I mean, I don't think Krug's getting moved. I don't see Nick Leddy getting moved, given the fact his age and his AAV for the next couple of years, so I don't see him being moved. They have a couple of really good young players and guys like Thomas and Cairo who are definitely not moving. I highly doubt they move Saad or Hayes at this point in time. But Buchnevich and Parayko are 2 really interesting pieces. Parayko's had a really good bounce back season. He's playing at a really good level. Is he playing at $6.5 million level for the next 6 years? Maybe not, but he's a really good and really big defenseman who can play really good top 4 minutes. And can really help a team in an offensive role, so I would not be overly surprised if there were interest in Parayko, and Parayko was potentially moving before a deadline. Buchnevich seems sort of thing I've seen him on a lot of trade bait boards. He's got this year plus next year left on his cap, I think at around $5.8 million. He's a very, very fantastic top 6 forward. He's worked extremely well with guys like Thomas and Cairo in the Blues organization, so I would not be overly surprised if the Blues will wind up moving him. So it will be an interesting situation to watch out for, but with the Blues now 5 points out of playoff spot, losing back-to-back games over the past couple of days and not looking overly good, I think there's a very likely chance that GM Doug Armstrong does wind up making some moves before a trade deadline, and I would not be overly surprised if this team was sellers. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there, but look out for the Blues to be sellers, and I would not be overly surprised if guys like Parayko and Buchnevich could potentially be moved before the trade deadline. Going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins, according to David Pagnola, the 4thperiod.com, we've heard a couple of names be mentioned as possible trade options. We know Gensel's name's been out there, Delkovich's name has been out there, Riley Smith's name has been out there, potentially Marcus Pettersson's name, but another name that could be on the trade market for the Pittsburgh Penguins, according to David Pagnola, is forward Rakell. Now, Rakell does have quite a decent cap hit. I think he signed for this year, plus I think it was either 4 or 5 more seasons at a $5.5 million cap hit, so he's on a longer term deal, but he's a really good goal scorer. He can put up consistently 20 to 30 goals a season. He's a really good top 6 forward. I think there could be a couple of teams out there who would be interested. Now, they would definitely have to be willing to take on Rakell's probably full salary. I don't think the Penguins will be willing to retain on Rakell, given the fact of his contract length, but he's probably another name we'll have to watch out. I mean, they're willing to move Riley Smith, who signed for this year plus 1 more. They're willing to move Marcus Pettersson, who signed for this year plus 1 more. They're willing to move a couple of their pending UFAs. Maybe they are open to moving a guy like Rickard Rakell. This Penguins team has not looked overly good this year, needs some sort of a reset. I would not be overly surprised if Rakell was a potential player who could be moved. And I know there was some talk about Brian Rust, but he's now injured, and Rakell hasn't had the best of seasons, only having 8 goals and 25 points in 44 games this year, but still, this is a really decent player there for the Pittsburgh Penguins, another one who I definitely could see wind up being moved, so we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there, but that could be a really good pickup there for a team trying to add a top 6 forward, so we'll have to wait and see on Rickard Rakell. Going over to the LA Kings, according to David Pagnola, the 4thperiod.com, as well as the people on Insider Trading, the LA Kings are currently evaluating Adrian Kempe. Now, as we talked about in our injury portion of the video, Kempe is currently injured, but there's a nagging suspicion that this could be a longer-term injury, and Kempe may be winding up being out for the rest of the regular season. The regular season is only about a month and a half away, so given that fact, if he's out for a month and a half, 2 months, Kempe could be out for the rest of the regular season, and if that's the case, they can place this $5.5 million cap hit on long-term injury reserve and open up a little bit of room to make some moves before a deadline. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there, but according to people on Insider Trading, Kempe is being evaluated, and if he's definitely going to be out for the rest of the regular season, expect Blake to try and utilize as much cap space as he can. And according to David Pagnotta, same sort of thing. If the Kempe is out for the rest of the season, look for Rob Blake to sort of weaponize his cap space. And on top of that, David Pagnotta does think that Rob Blake is possibly looking at a top 6 forward to sort of help this Kings team, given the fact that Kempe could be out for the season, and if he's going to be out for the rest of the regular season and he's going to be out on long-term injury reserve, they also have Victor Arvidsson out right now and Carl Grenstrom out right now due to injuries. So adding another top 6 forward while those guys are out will be a huge boost there for the LA Kings. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But if Kempe is out for any significant period of time, look for them to move his cap on long-term injury reserve and try and add somewhere else. Also looking at the New Jersey Devils, this was mentioned on not only the Insider Trading video but also by David Pagnotta, and they said that the Devils are currently on the outside looking in right now. They're 5 points out behind the Flyers and the Bolts for last playoff spots in the Eastern Conference. There's no guarantee the Devils make it into the playoffs. Now, apparently, according to Darren Dreger, the Devils are really taking this next stretch of games, this next 3 stretch over in California, which was that dominant game against the San Jose Sharks, plus the next couple of games against the Kings and the Ducks, as a really stretch to see if this team is going to be potentially still competing for a playoff spot, or if they lose a lot of games and they wind up being on the outside looking in really much. So it's going to be interesting to see, but according to Darren Dreger, this next stretch of games really decide what they'll do, and there is a slight possibility that if they do wind up losing a couple of these games, they've already beat San Jose. But if they do lose to a team like Anaheim and LA, maybe they consider moving Tyler Toffoli. Toffoli is a really good top 6 forward. He's having another good season. I think he's already got 20 goals. He could definitely finish above 30 this year. So Toffoli is a very likely trade candidate. Now, according to Darren Dreger, they are having contract talks with Toffoli to try and keep him in New Jersey. But there's also a very likely possibility that they could wind up being sellers. And if they are sellers, then maybe they wind up moving Tyler Toffoli. And that's another thing that David Pagnotta said. He says that there's no guarantee that the Devils will be sellers, but if the team was sellers, and if they were to consider some of their UFAs to be moved, Toffoli would be a very intriguing name. And David Pagnotta does wonder if the LA Kings could have interest in bringing back Tyler Toffoli, who's on a final year of his deal. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. But according to Darren Dreger, the next 3 games are going to be huge for the New Jersey Devils to decide for if this team is going to be contending for a playoff spot, or if this team is going to be on the outside looking in and potentially making some moves before a trade deadline. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But look out for the New Jersey Devils. They could be looking to either potentially try and upgrade this team before the playoffs, or they could be looking to potentially move a guy like Tyler Toffoli. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there and what direction the New Jersey Devils go. And then on top of that, we also have an update here for the Calgary Flames. We talked about this in a video we did earlier in the day. Chris Tanev has been moved to the Dallas Stars. It's a big piece moved by the Calgary Flames. It's another piece moved by Calgary Flames. So this is a really good pickup there for Calgary. If you look at since the offseason, there was a lot of talk that the Flames would have to move some of their UFAs. Look at what they've moved and look what they've been able to acquire since then. They moved Toffoli to Jersey for Sharangovich and a 3rd round pick. They moved Zadorov to Vancouver for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. They moved Lindholm to Vancouver for Yermo Brucewick's a potential 3rd round pick, a 1st round pick, and Andrei Kuzmenko, and now they've moved Tanev to Dallas in exchange for Khusnutdinov, a 2nd round pick, and a conditional 3rd round pick. So the Flames have made a ton of moves over the past year to add a lot of pieces for their pending UFAs, and it doesn't look like they're going to stop there. The attention now shifts after the Tanev deal for Calgary to Noah Hanifin and Jacob Markstrom. Now, Markstrom is a really good goaltender. There's no guarantee Markstrom will get moved, given the fact he has this year plus another couple seasons, $6 million. And on top of that, he has got no movement clause, and there's no guarantee that he gets moved. And this may be a deal that's easier to make in the offseason. But on top of that, there's been a lot of talk that New Jersey's had a ton of interest. I wouldn't be surprised if other teams like Carolina or LA would have some interest, especially with the fact that Saros might be off the trade block now with the fact that Nashville's in a playoff spot. So So given that fact, I think Markstrom could definitely be dealt, and he's going to be a name we have to watch out for the next week. Same sort of thing with Noah Hanifin. On top of Markstrom, Hanifin's the last of the pending UFA defenseman there for the Calgary Flames. He's a really good top 4 defenseman and could really help this team long term. So given that fact, I think there's a very likely chance that Hanifin also gets moved in the next couple of days of game action. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But now that Tanev's gone, attention shifts to Hanifin and Markstrom, and I do wonder if we see both of those guys get moved in the next week. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, here going over to the Ducks and the Rangers. Could those two teams be working on a trade to send some sort of a trade package to the Rangers? Now, according to a lot of people I've seen on X or Twitter, whatever it's called right now, Pat Verbeek wound up making his way to the New York Rangers Columbus Blue Jackets game and was scouting that game. So that got a lot of people thinking that the Ducks and the Rangers are potentially talking about a trade, and that Verbeek was scouting some of their talent. Now, a lot of people do think that the Rangers may have some interest in trying to bring in ANA-NYR. We know that this team needs some center depth. We know that they could definitely use a lot of center depth. So adding a guy like ANA-NYR is not overly surprising. We know they've also been linked to a guy like Frank Vatrano, who's a former New York Ranger himself. Had a fantastic run with the New York Rangers a couple years ago before signing in Anaheim the year after. And he had a really good season there in Florida, New York that a couple of years ago. Didn't have the greatest season last year, but he's having a fantastic season this year and could be a really good pickup for a couple of teams. So a lot of people do think that could the Rangers be looking at a package of Henrique and Vatrano from the Ducks? And if that's potentially possible, could the Ducks GM have been looking at some of the talent that the Rangers have in the organization? Some people are mentioning a guy like Kakko, given the fact that Kakko has been mentioned in a rumor mill a little bit over the past little while, and that could be a really good potential asking price for the Ducks if they were to move both Henrique and Vatrano to the Rangers. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But according to a lot of reports, the Ducks GM was scouting the Rangers game, and there's a very likely chance this two teams could be talking. And could we see a potential deal that could see something like Henrique and Vatrano go to New York Rangers in exchange for Kakko plus to go into the Ducks? I think it's a very likely possibility. We'll have to wait and see exactly what happens. This could be a really good pickup there for the New York Rangers if they were to make this sort of a deal with the Anaheim Ducks. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But that's what I'm going to talk about for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think about all this discussed in today's video? Do you think the Rangers and the Ducks will make a sort of a deal? Do you think the Ducks GM was at the Rangers game scouting some of the Rangers talent? And if so, do you think they could definitely pull off some sort of a deal that could send the Rangers Henrique and Vatrano? Definitely let you get your thoughts on that. Who do you think the next Calgary Flame needs to be moved? We now know Tanev is a Dallas Star. Which is the next Flame to be moved? Could it be Markstrom or is it Hanifin? Definitely let you get your thoughts on that. What do you think about the New Jersey Devils? Are they going to be sellers? Could they move Tyler Toffoli? And if so, where do you think he could go? And if they aren't going to move Tyler Toffoli, do they still try and add a goaltender before a trade deadline? Definitely get your thoughts on that. Do the Kings, are they able to get some cap flexibility by placing Adrian Kempe's salary in long-term injury reserve? And if so, do they go out and try and acquire a forward, or do they still try and go out and get a goaltender? Definitely get your thoughts on that. Do you think the Penguins want moving Rakell before a trade deadline, or is that more of an off-season move? And even if that, do you think the Rakell is a potential trade candidate for the Pittsburgh Penguins? Definitely get your thoughts on that. Plus, do you think the Blues could wind up making some seller moves before a trade deadline? And if so, do you think guys like Buchnevich and Parayko could potentially be on the move before a trade deadline? Definitely have to get your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I want to talk about for today. Remember to stay tuned for my March 8th trade deadline video, when I discuss all the live trade deadline videos that happen on March 8th at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time or 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. So definitely don't forget to stay tuned for that. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video. If you're related, remember to subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would have never been able to do this with all of you guys. So don't forget to continue to subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all those discussed in today's video. Also a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis. I've been doing a couple of recent mock trades like Eberle to Edmonton and Novak to New York Rangers. So definitely don't forget to check that out down in the comment section below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.